Well, this is a tremendous pleasure for me now to introduce three people that I consider very close friends. I also consider a tremendous troika, if I may put it that way, of tremendously talented three women. Margareta von Trotta, the director, the very, very well-known director. And sitting next to her left is Pam Katz, the co-writer of this movie that you've just seen. And here, Barbara Sukova, a very great actress who has been, you can get conventional biographies of all these people in many, many ways. I'm not going to do that. First of all, we want to have as much time for discussion as possible. And so I'm going to say a couple of personal things about each one. Margareta, I met 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I think, when she had this idea, this extraordinary idea, to make a film about Hannah Arendt. And from first to last, all that we've talked about it, and I think we probably will today, as far as there have been films made about things. There's a film about Descartes there and other thinkers. This is not a film about someone's thought. It's about thinking. I believe this film, to me, the more I see it, the more I realize that. And from the very first, Margareta said, how on earth are we going to make a dramatic, turn thinking into a drama, particularly for Hannah Arendt, who, as you see in the film, was kind of withdrawn from the world when she was thinking. That is a problem. Margaret, by the way, I long before I knew her, the first film of hers I saw, and Barbara, was the Sisters. It's called The Sisters. It's called something else in German. Marianne and Juliana. But there's also a German title, like in the top. Yeah, right, in the leaden time. It's one of the, I think, most marvelous films I've ever seen, and it established both Margareta as a director and Barbara as an actress, really in the forefront of the new German cinema. They both worked with Fassbinder before, and now. In any case, Pam Katz next is the co-writer of this film, and one thing that Pam did was immerse herself in Hannah Arendt's writings, and those of you who know a lot of her writings probably recognized things in the film, not as quotations, but as dialogue. And that is one way that Hannah Arendt really enters this film. Pam has a new book I'm dying to read coming out on Brecht and Weil. Barbara is a star of the first magnitude and has won every award there is. She won't win the Oscar for the best foreign actress because this film was not nominated by Germany for the Oscar. It has to be nominated by in Europe, Lola, everything she has won, and as Margaret as well, of course. Now, the thing about I want to say about Barbara is that when we first met, she told me, look, Jerry, I have listened to Hannah Arendt in German, and I've listened to her in English. And I am not going to imitate her. I'm not going to imitate her. Hannah had a very strong accent. Barbara made up an accent for this film. She has no accent in English whatsoever. German is her first language, but she's lived here and raised a family here. And she said, I am going to find out all I can about Hannah Arendt, but I am not going to then mime her or imitate her. I don't want to do that. So I think this combination between these three members of this fantastic troika have all come together in the scene, I was talking just before about the scene that you saw towards the end of the film, not really at the end, when it's after when Barbara, as Hannah, is lying down and thinking, and she hears in her mind the prosecutor at the trial of Eichmann saying, do you know what you did? Do you think what you did? Are you an imbecile? Are you an imbecile? You don't even think what you did? And she's hearing this, and then her eyes open. And to me, that was such a beautiful image of this extraordinary thought that Hannah Arendt had, and that is still so very controversial, that Eichmann did not think what he was doing. He didn't think he knew perfectly well what he was doing, but he didn't think the meaning of it. He couldn't imagine the lives of the 3 million men, women, and children he sent to their deaths. And he was not an imbecile. So that's all. I want to start this off by asking a question to, I suppose, Margareta, but all of you. But Margareta, because when she first came 10 years ago, when we first met, what was it about Hannah Arendt, or in your own life, or what inspired you to make this film, which really is, as I say, to me, absolutely extraordinary, the only film I've ever seen about thinking.
Yeah, but what inspired me, I had a very much fear about it. And only when I told her, because we did a film together, Rosenstraße already, and she helped me for the script. And it was not me even, it was a friend of mine who said, you have to do, after Rosenstraße, you have to do a film about Hannah Arendt. And I said, but how could I? I knew who she was, and in Germany perhaps we were all leftists after 68 and still in the 80s, and we were not so fond of her because she wrote this book, you certainly know, The Origins of Totalitarianism. And there she put the communism and fascism on the same row, and so we were all still a little bit naively, let's say, leftist, and so we didn't want to touch her so much. And after the wall came down, we started to understand that she was the one who was like a prophet, and she was the one to know much more than we did. And then, for me, I'm only speaking for me, I started to be really interested in her, because I did a film before, Rosa Luxemburg, and so that was the woman of the beginning of the century, of the last century, and she was, for me, the first, in a way, the first victim of the Nationalsocialists, because the soldiers who murdered her then afterwards went with Hitler. So, since she was Jewish. So for me, that was the beginning of the century. And Hannah Arendt was looking back into this time of the Nationalsocialism. And she's looking back at how she says, in the dark times. And so that was for me a sort of, wie sagt man, Klammer, yeah, to this century, because I wanted, and in middle it was the Rosenstraße with the woman who were caring for her Jewish husband and standing in the streets and protesting and getting their husbands. So that was perhaps the moment I said, yes, I have to do it, to give that century and she was really the prophet then for me, for nowadays, what we think about these times and about Eichmann and about many other criminals, war criminals, and so, and then I asked Pam, and I said, are you, because I was very afraid in the beginning, and then I said, are you perhaps with me when, and so, and she said, yes, yes, and she immediately started to make research, and so, and then I was pushed by these two, by my friend and by her, and then I asked Barbara, and are you ready to go this really long road with me? What did you say?
I don't remember.
She was very fearful too, but that was the moment when it started. And then it was a long time to know really what was aspect, because only thinking is really invisible. To make a film about thinking, how you could make that. That, for me, that was the main question. And when we found the solution to only to speak about the 4 years of Eichmann, and there you could look at him, and you could participate to her thinking, her observing him and her thinking about him. So that was, for me, the solution. That really the spectator has the possibility to go with her. So I let time to these both ladies to say something.
Would either of you like to speak up to that?
Yeah, sure.
You?
I think one thing I would like to say is that we were greatly, in order to portray thinking, you also had to understand her thoughts. So we both read a tremendous amount, and when Barbara knew that the film was going to happen, she also read a tremendous amount. But we had 3 really great guides, without whom it would have been, I think, impossible to make our way through the maze of all of her books and ideas. And the first was, of course, Jerome Cohn, who, as he said, has been there from the very beginning. And we also got to know Lotte Kuhler, her assistant, who's no longer with us, who is also a wonderful help, and Elizabeth Young-Bruhl, her biographer. And with the help of that other troika, it would have been impossible, I think, to really understand the woman and her thoughts without meeting the people who were so close to her and her work. And that was very helpful.
For me, it was absolutely overwhelming. Am I mic'd?
I think so.
Do you hear me? Yeah. It was because I started reading, and I've been an actress all my life. I have not studied philosophy. I'm not an intellectual, and I started reading an enormous amount. And whenever I was reading, I was nervous that it was not enough, and it was. And then I had to also do the other part, not just, to try to get into her intellectual life, but also her personal life. So I had to read her letters, and then she's just this giant, yes. And as an actress, I felt completely, you're just not up to it, really. I was scared. We were both scared. And but I have done. This was my 6th movie with Margarete von Trotta. So I had, of course, a lot of confidence and trust in her, because she has led me to good performances. And the reason why I also wanted to do it, I know with Margarete von Trotta, the films I've done, they always led me into other worlds. And it's not just, finding out the psychology of a person and digging into your own soul, but to learn about a time, to learn about history. And I think one thing that connects us is we are both very curious and really love to learn and love to talk about things. Yeah. And I knew, and also, and Pam was very open. I could basically call in the middle of the night and ask her a question, and she would answer me. So it was a very, very frightening thing, but once I started, I just had to do it. It just took on its own life.
She even got a professor of Columbia, a philosophy professor. She knows much more about philosophy now than I do. So.
Let me tell just a funny anecdote in relation to this. When Margaret, as I say, 10 years ago now, first talked about this movie, and I had seen by then quite a number of movies, including the Rosa Luxemburg, and by the way, that's an interesting story, because although Luxemburg was a real Marxist, in one sense of the word at least, Hannah adored her. Hannah thought she was a great, great woman. So it wasn't against Marx or Marxism or Marxianism, if you prefer, as such. It was what happened under Stalin in the name of Marx that she first noted. But what I wanted to say was, so I'd seen several films of Margarete's with Barbara, and so I said to to Margaret when she talked about this film, I said, well, Barbara has to play Hannah. And very slyly, Margarita said, oh, Jerry, what do you mean? She's blonde, she's beautiful, she's very German looking. And I said, I fell for it. Of course, she wanted me all the time. She wanted, but isn't it amazing? Does this woman look like Hannah Arendt? I mean,
We had the same problem with Rosa Luxemburg.
yeah, of course, even more, even perhaps even more. Yeah, even more.
I mean, Margarita always said that you would not make this film with anybody else. And I know when we were writing the speech, for example, there was no other actress on the face of the earth for whom you could have written this 8-minute long speech. And not just because it's a good performance, but because Barbara really did not only understood every concept that she was speaking about, but when we were finally done with it, we thought, Barbara, I had one of those middle of the night calls and came over and we went over it paragraph by paragraph, and then we got the philosophy tutor on the phone, and you really combed through it, and the performance is also, like Hannah Arendt, it's understanding it. And I can't think of another actress who could have done it.
It's really interesting. It was very interesting for me. It's not like such a great acting job, really. Once you understand something, and you just kind of have to say it. It's not that you have to add so much stuff to it.
You know, that's the longest speech you ever saw in a film, in the end. So that was a risk. I knew that I could do it because I knew her, but everybody told me, that will be perhaps boring, and you know, for cinema it has always to be action. And there it's real action, but you can think with her, and that's a lot of action too. I was sure that I could do that, but because there was many people, they said, to make a film about Hannah Arendt, you have immediately in the beginning to start with a speech, so everybody knows that she is an important philosopher, important thinker, and I said that would be boring. Because before you know her, before you are interested in her, and so I said we have to start with this just a conversation between two women who are speaking about their husbands and their lovers. And when you read the correspondence of Mary McCarthy with Hannah Arendt, she was very, very much outspoken, about all her affairs, about all her life and so. And I thought that is two wonderful women, one thinker and one writer, and they're just speaking about love affairs. And so then you can enter in the film and you say, oh yeah, they are also women, and then going on with and building up their importance and their thoughts. So, no, we did it well, I hope.
I want to say we have 2 microphones on the floor, and if there are people who want to ask questions, please, we encourage that. We'd like you to. And yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Anybody who wants, if there are other people who want to ask questions, yes, please come down and form a line. And then we, yeah.
Do speak.
Please.
You can go ahead.
Thank you. And I'm a survivor, and it's so disappointing. I'm going to be 79 my next birthday, and it has puzzled me since I'm a teenager, since teenage years, that the figure of 6 million is inaccurate. And why are the 13 million people that included gypsies and disabled and all the rest constantly omitted from the historical conferences and debates and all the rest? I urge you, please, to correct this. Point number 2, never again was meant for all, Jew or Muslim, short or tall. Why is there not anger and outrage at, it's not just the USA, it's Canada, it's every industrialized nation that makes their money by murder and slaughter in Afghanistan, Iraq, and the list is interminable. Please address these things at your conferences, in your papers, and wherever else you have access to our rather limited ability to learn from history. Thank you.
Can I respond first? Because I couldn't agree with you more, and I do want to say that the organizer of this conference, Arian Mack, has sponsored so much it's not about persecution of Jews, but persecutions of scholars all over the world. Samantha Power was here earlier, our ambassador to the UN, and she's going to be shown after this again. But the Eichmann, why the Eichmann story is about Jews, it's because he was known as an expert on the Jewish question. That's because he only dealt with Jews. He did not deal with it. His job was not to exterminate the gypsies or homosexuals or anything like that. It was strictly Jews, and that's why I just say that for why this film is about the 6 million and not, as you say, the many more millions. Anybody want to?
No, it's difficult. We didn't do a political film. We did do a portrait of her during this time where she was going to Jerusalem and then writing about Eichmann. So I can put myself as a director to be more intelligent or more knowing more than she did in the time. So we went with her. We did a film about her. So I couldn't put in Afghanistan or everything else from today. You can think about it when you see the film. It gives you the key, the film, to think on your own, with your own mind, and then to connect also the presence with what happened in the film or what happened in this time. But we can't do it. Then it would be perhaps a pamphlet or a documentary, but not when you do a fiction film.
So maybe we should go on. Yeah.
Yes, it seems to me that Hannah Arendt was attempting, like the New School, to get people to think. And when I went to school, we never had Mein Kampf by Hitler as a text. I knew Alan Cranston, who spent his own money, a senator, in order to have that text published in America so Americans would know what Hitler's thoughts were about. And so the question I have is, why is it that we do not have Hitler's text taught and people discussing it? Why do we not know what Hitler has talked about, what other people who might be slightly crazy have spoken about? Because I think this is a country that refuses to think about anything other than their own thoughts. So I'm just wondering about that. I'm not talking about taking out a library. I'm talking about it being part of courses in America and in other countries. Why do we have to make sure that we only have our own things in our country? Why don't we get people to think and argue about what's going on?
One problem in Germany was that everybody who got married got Mein Kampf, but unfortunately too few people read it.
Yeah,
otherwise they would have known what was going on, what was going to happen.
And now you can't read it because it's forbidden.
People were given.
Yes.
No, that was in the time of Hitler.
Yes.
They had to read it, but they didn't. And Hannah Arendt read it. So when she went away in 1933 from Germany, she was one of the few people who read it, and she knew what will come. But so many other intellectuals, even they said, oh, well, that's just bullshit. And it's badly written and so, and they didn't read it.
It's not much of a read. I would say. The awful book. Yeah, but well, let's maybe. How many people are there? Could I just see a show of hands? Because maybe we should consider. All right, let's go back and forth then. All right, we still have time. Yeah.
My name's Louis Croy. I'm a film critic.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is not working.
That is working, I think. Is it not?
Is
I think if
is
you
that
pull it
better?
down.
Okay. Margarita, my name is Louis Proict. I'm a film critic. I asked the people at Film Forum to forward you my review. In case I printed out a copy for you to have. I was a student of both Heinrich Blücher at Bard College and of Hans Jonas at the New School. And I knew both of them pretty well, and I would say both of them had a major impact on my evolution, my political evolution, and also my moral sensibility. In terms of the question of exterminationism, Hannah Arendt wrote a book, Origins of Totalitarianism, to deal with what Hitler did and what Stalin did. But isn't it a fact that the democracy could be exterminationist? Thomas Jefferson said that if the American Indians got in the way of the development of this nation, they should be exterminated. So did George Washington. We dropped nuclear weapons on civilians in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, okay? The reason there was a trial of Eichmann is because the United States won the war. If Germany won the war, then Harry Truman would have been on trial, okay? I remain a
I'm very
politically,
grateful that the Americans won the war.
I remain politically where Heinrich Blücher was in the 1920s. He was a Marxist, okay? The question of morality and the state, you really have to stop and think about it. Samantha Powers, okay, if the United States was ever made to eat crow the way Germany did, she and the gang that's in Washington now would also be put on trial.
All right, sir, do you have a question?
330 drone strikes on Afghanistan is American policy. That's punished, that's a war crime. Bob Kerry, who was the president of this school, was a war criminal.
Sir.
And that is the fact.
Do you have a question about the film?
No, I don't have a question, I have a statement, and that's finished.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
It has nothing to do with our film, perhaps, but it's good that you said it.
No argument. Yes.
Does this work? Yeah. Hi, my name is Julia Honkasalo. I'm a PhD student in politics here. I'm from Finland myself, and I've been studying Arendt for quite many years. I'm working on a... Can you hear me?
Sir, could you speak?
Yeah, you can hear me?
It's difficult to hear you.
Really?
Just speak a little
Okay,
more slowly.
is this better?
Well, yeah, that's better,
Yeah.
I think.
Also, Okay.
You don't have to put it in your mouth.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna say this again. So I'm a PhD student in politics and philosophy here at the New School, and I'm working on a dissertation on Arendt. My interest is feminist interpretations of Hannah Arendt. And there's a scene in the movie where Lotte Kohler is reading the reactions to her Eichmann report. And it reminded me of the way that feminist interpreters throughout from the late 70s and 80s have responded to her work, either by hating it, saying that she's wrong, or then appraising her. So I have actually two questions. This is my first question, that maybe could you say something about how did you, when you were working on her text, how did you, what are your ideas on her relation to gender and Arendt as a woman? Because I think there's much to be said about that. My second question is that Karl Jaspers is not a part of the film, and of course when you decide to write a plot, you have to narrow it down to somewhere. Yet he had quite important things to say about the death penalty, for example, and he was a very important part of Arendt's intellectual development. So could you say what made you decide to not take Jaspers in? So those are the two questions, her relationship to gender and Arendt as a woman, and the second one is Jaspers. Thank you.
Okay. So I will answer for the first question and she for the second. She was not a feminist at all. She didn't have to be, because she was from the beginning, she was one of the most brilliant students in her class and with Heidegger, and so much more brilliant than some of her male colleagues. So from the beginning, she was always extraordinary. So she had not to fight for women's causes like we did or I did in the 70s. But she was an extraordinary woman. So we could have her as an example, or as somebody was as Vorbild, an idol to look up to her. But when she was controversial, when she was criticized so heavily, that, I think, was also, and when the professors are saying that is all Hannah Arendt, all arrogance and without feeling, that is because she was a woman. That nobody would have said to a male professor. And I got a letter of the dean of the university, the American university in Luxembourg, because we did most of the part of the film we did in Luxembourg, and we did the office of Heidegger. We did it in his office, the dean, and he then after the film wrote me a letter saying he liked the film very much, but that was for him a reflection, that he said, no, I never heard that somebody of my male colleagues was criticized of arrogance or of not having the right feelings. No, that is because she was a woman. So,
interject one thing. One thing Hannah Arendt wasn't, it was arrogant. She was not arrogant at all. She was a very self-confident person. She was she expressed herself strongly. She could be abrasive, and she did not suffer foolishness easily or well at all. But arrogance, which is, I think she knew too much about the Greek gods who punished hubris immediately to know enough never to be arrogant. Sorry.
I was actually quite astonished to read in her letters how she insisted and how she talked about certain dress codes for women, and also that she said in an interview with Günter Gauss, there are certain things that don't go well with women. It's to be a boss, right? Mm-hmm. They shouldn't dictate things. That seemed to me really old-fashioned to say that.
I think I couldn't agree more. I think that's absolutely right. She had a kind of, it's funny to say this because you're such a radical thinker, but she had a kind of bourgeois side to her, a very well-mannered,
and I think also
for the most
she
part.
was so intelligent, and she was so superior to many intelligent men. And so she had to plead for forgiveness that she was much more intelligent. So in her home, and also with Heinrich Bücher, she made a little bit more the housewife than perhaps she would have done with somebody else.
Vive la petite différence.
Yeah.
Pam, you wanted to...
No, I was just going to have you help me quote this letter that she received from Princeton, where they offered her a special professorship, and they said that she was the first woman to be offered this, and didn't she write back and say that she wouldn't accept it unless they took out this exception of her being the first woman? Because she was aware already that she was a woman.
But she didn't want that in there, right?
Yes, right. But moving on to Jaspers, who you should know, we're very well aware of the importance of him in her personal and her intellectual life, and he was in the film for a very long, or I should say he was in the many versions of the screenplay for a very long time. It was a very good way to kind of help us develop her thought throughout the film. But at the end of the day, it was becoming a film about, as we used to joke, it was Hannah and her old men. And you have to narrow the scope of a film. This is actually a huge cast. So, but we had Blücher, a very important relationship. We made the decision to take Heidegger, which was also a big decision, whether or not to have him. We had Blumenfeld and that very close relationship, and it was just too much for one film, I think, to keep him in.
Because Jaspers was so important for her that if he is just one of a crowd, then it would have been so little space for him in the film that it was almost inadequate to the role that he played in her life. So it was better to keep him out than giving him like a small part.
You can all read the correspondence with Jaspers. I think that's the most important she had.
It's one of the great correspondences, I
That's
think.
fantastic,
Right.
and also it was for over a long, long time, and they were both so open to each other that that's really worth to read it.
And I think it's fair to say that that correspondence exerted an enormous influence on the script, because the kind of intellectual goal of the script was to explain and break down what Hannah Arendt was talking about when she talked about the banality of evil, for example. And their correspondence, where they discussed their ideas in such great detail back and forth, actually helped put that structure of her way of thinking into the film. So he's there without being there.
I think now we should, Arian, I don't know, we should double up now and take four questions. And please cite your questions briefly, and we'll take 2 from this side and 2 from this side, and then we'll try to remember them.
Okay, hi. Thank you for this wonderful film, an important film, a necessary film. My name is John Braden. I'm a teacher, a writer, an activist. I'm also trying to nurture thinking in the world. And I think this film helps me to do that, to nurture thinking in my classrooms as a writer and as a host of a weekly TV show in New York City. And tonight's episode is all about thinking, and it's about the connection between thinking in language and thinking in social life and thinking in culture. So you've given me a great inspiration in my work. The question I'd like to pose is thinking about our times today, thinking about the technical definition of fascism, which is a merger of corporate and politics. And we see the increasing corporate control of our media, which tends to dumb down and create a crisis of thinking, and the corporatization of our educational system, which is also, creating a crisis, and also the political system after Citizens United, where now the corporations are controlling the politics. What would Hannah Arendt say if she were alive today? Can we make a connection between the banality of evil then and this sort of drifting toward this kind of authoritarianism? I just found out the TPP was defeated, thank goodness, by Harry Reid, but yes.
Okay,
So that's
This is a complex
what
question.
she's thinking now, we can say.
But we're going to take
Yes.
4 questions now, and I have written down a note on this one. From this side, or, yeah? Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you for a wonderful film. I was in Hannah Arendt's Plato seminar at Northwestern just before she left for Jerusalem. You rightly made thinking central, but also there was the theme of detachment on her part. I'm wondering, is detachment the price for thinking?
Is the price, sir? Is that what the price to pay?
What's the detachment?
The detachment is the price to pay for thinking. It's a good question, I think. Yes, now we'll take over here.
Thank you for coming. I just had a question that has to do with the film and the choice that you made to, do a bookending thing, start with the same shot, basically similar shot, and end with her like lying down on the couch and smoking the cigarette. And and that's kind of what stuck out to me, being like, why did you do that? Like, why did you make that decision to have her in that moment, to begin and end the same moment?
Okay. All right, and one more.
Bob Larrick, I wanted to thank you for the film, and it did bring up the issue of thinking. And I had worked with someone who had worked on the UN, since we had Samantha Power speaking before, who helped, her husband helped write the UN Charter, and she had worked with Eleanor Roosevelt on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I had represented a mental health group which really focuses on these things of thinking. International Society for General Semantics, which does have a society. And yes, how can we get the American support and perhaps Mayor de Blasio support for a model of mutual respect for the importance of universal human rights and ethical, rational, humanistic thinking in modern times?
Okay, all right, that's a huge question. Now let us answer those 4 questions. Would anybody like to respond to the first one which was about?
That must be you. You knew her personally. We are
about fascism. Well, look, I make a very brief answer to that, if you like. Eichmann was normal. She keeps emphasizing that he was normal. Now, the other point that Arendt always makes throughout her writing is that a free citizen is never normal. There is no such thing. He is always, or she, unique, not normal. So she actually said once that the normality of Eichmann is more scary than all his atrocities combined. So that is what I am not disagreeing with you at all. I think this is a problem. I think there are some people in this world who are trying to look for signs, or as she called them, elements of totalitarianism in the world today. Now, did anybody want to say anything more? No. All right, the second question is certainly not for me, is about Hannah Arendt's detachment as a thinker. It's sort of world withdrawal. I mean, that's what Barbara did. Thinking is not act. Remember those wonderful dicta of Heidegger's that are in the film? Heidegger, thinking is not acting. That was one of the problems with the film from the beginning. But was the point of the question that the detachment
was the price of thinking?
The price of thinking, that's exactly right. So maybe, I don't know, what do you want to say?
She was obviously deeply involved in that subject because she was Jewish, and I think she wanted by all means avoid to be biased in any way. And I think why she was so attacked was very often not because of the content, but of her seemingly being detached, of the ironic tone she used often. And I think that was precisely a detachment for 2 reasons. Because one, it would have been probably too painful. It's a kind of a defense, but also it gave her the possibility to weigh all different sides. And the film was actually at one point called The Controversy, and I think that was very important. And Hannah Arendt, I think she really wanted a discourse. She wanted a controversy. She wanted people to discuss. She wanted all sides to be taken into consideration. I think, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I think that for that you need some kind of personal detachment.
Yeah, and when we spoke with Lotte Köhler, she told us that she was very, very involved and very hurt and very emotionalized about the Holocaust because so many people criticized her that she had no feelings for all these victims of the Holocaust. And that was the opposite, that she was really very, very moved and touched. But as a philosopher, she couldn't put, as a writer, you could do that. You could say, say me and myself and my pain and my douleur and all that. But as a philosopher, you had to be detached to really present it in a more objective way that has nothing to do that she had no feelings. And that was for me the most astonishing point, that people really thought that she was emotionless or she was had no feelings. It would, like her husband says in the film, it would be a shame for her to put her own feelings when there were so many victims. No.
On the other hand, she also would that.
Interruption, but if this was a man, nobody would ever think of asking whether the price of thinking is detachment.
Why?
Would not occur to anyone.
No, you are right.
No,
But
I
don't
think it's a
agree
good
with you at
question.
all.
It's a good question because
I
I
think
think
it's-
it comes to the heart of the controversy
Yes.
in many ways, because a lot of people have said, and there've been a lot of writing about this in the wake of our film, that it wasn't what she said, but how she said it. And the question does come up when she said, I was there as a reporter, and I was just reporting on the facts. But there's no doubt that from time to time, as we did try to address in the film, that it was the way in which she said things that often provoked anger. When she says it's the darkest chapter in the whole dark story, there were people who took very specific issue with that. Whether or not, in fact, Charlotte Barat is correct when she says she repressed her emotions and they come out in another way, and perhaps they came out in the ironic tone, that's maybe a matter of opinion, but it is something to be addressed. But I think Hannah Arendt's need to understand and her attempt to say things as she felt they were, and they weren't just facts, it was a search for the truth. And there was incredible passion in what the gentleman is calling detachment. I wouldn't even use the word detachment, but I know what you mean.
Well, kind of world withdrawal. I mean, she does definitely say that that is a condition of thinking. But the other thing that is so original in Arendt is that, and no one has said this before, that thinking liberates another faculty of judgment. And that's what the last speech is. That is judgment. And that comes very close to action. Thinking is not acting, but judgment is the other side of action.
Yeah, she said this one sentence which I always, she said she hates the sentence, "Who am I to judge?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she said,
But
If
the
we
funny
didn't
thing is,
judge-
the older I am, the more this sentence comes to my mind, and the more more information we have. I mean, I have to say, we shot for a short time in Israel, and we met Israelis and Palestinians, and I came out of this country and I thought, who am I to judge? And it was really difficult for me, to this point, to make any kind of judgment, because before you can judge anything, you really have to understand it, and it takes such time and involvement to understand something. So, yeah.
Exactly.
But I wouldn't say that thinking is not action. For me, it's action. It's just that she lies down and she's looking and she's smoking, like she said, perhaps a little bit too much, but she smoked even more. And when I presented the film in Israel, there was a cousin of her coming as the first time he saw the film, and I was very afraid what he would say, because he knew her and I didn't. So I said, "What do you think about the film?" And he said, "Oh, she was smoking much more than in your film."
But that was a cousin of hers, isn't it? Well, okay, thinking and acting is a huge thing, but it doesn't mean I don't mean that she's unconscious. She herself said she's withdrawn from the world, and there's something to that. But now that brings up the third question, which is something about smoking. Why smoke?
No.
What was it?
no, it was why the circle.
And ended in the same situation.
The book ending with the line in the
Yeah, because that was when you saw the film. So it starts with the kidnapping of Eichmann, and you see it's dark in the beginning. It's like the night, and then coming two eyes, out of the past now and coming up to us, and then only we see that the boss And for me, it's like there's something coming out of the dark times looking at us. And then he's kidnapped and so on, and in the end, it's only a lamp on the floor which remains. It's a light. And then she's there and she's lighting a cigarette. So the light from this coming from the dark times, and she's lighting, and then she goes thinking around in the apartment, and she lies down, and that is a description of Mary McCarthy. She described it when she was thinking, she always lied down, and she looked up, and you could feel that she was thinking. And there she starts to, for me, she's already connected. In the moment she lit her cigarette, she's already connected with Eichmann, and that will be the story of the film. And she starts to think, even if she doesn't know him yet, and she doesn't know that she will go there, but it's already there for me. And in the end, she's still, and that is the sentence of the end of the film, she's still thinking about evil until her death. So it goes on, this thinking about evil and not evil, and radical evil and not radical evil. So.
We really got to move wonderful.
Could I ask a final question? And that is, it's my understanding that she was not at the New School at the time of the Eichmann controversy, that she was never pressured by the faculty and leadership from the New School out of the New School, that she was actually welcomed by the New School after the Eichmann controversy.
Yes.
And if all that is correct, why represent the New School this way?
It wasn't meant to be the New School. You're absolutely right in what you say.
No, it was not the New School. It was in Chicago.
Yeah.
No, it's in the beginning, we just wanted to, because that's, for us, it's a homage at the New School, that we put the New School in the beginning.
Exactly.
No, it's not a critic. She's in front of the New School, and the students are very polite, and they give her the cigarette. And so it was just that she is a member of the New School. That was for us. But in the end, the critics, all that came out from the New School. It's only Hans Jonas, who was also in the New School.
Totally
and he
different. It didn't look anything like the New School.
We were actually at great pains to make sure that could, sir?
Representing the New School as if they were driving her out.
I just wanted to say we were at great pains to not give that impression, and in the character of Professor Miller, who's at the party, who's her friend, who turns against her, is seen very distinctly on the far more rural campus. He's then figured again, having been seen on this rural campus with Mary McCarthy, he's seen in the room asking her to let go of her classes, and in the auditorium where she gives the speech. So actually, one of the purposes of showing the exterior of this more New England style, more generic campus was to differentiate it from the New School. And so it was never our intention to implicate the New School in the particular hostility that took place.
I just want to say there was a question about the future of humanistic thinking, and well, I can say that I don't think it's very rosy. But now, are we done, Arian, and we have to stop now? We're finished. Okay.